quickly, this is just a follow-up from our March call to talk about some of the East Texas plants. I'm out of the Texas Coastal Ecological Services field office in Houston, and these plants are in our East Texas area. The first one is the Agalinus navacetensis, which is a Navasota false foxglove, and staff in our field office are working on a species status assessment to inform a listing decision. Right now, it's Sheena Waters is the contact for that plant. And she is assessing the current conditions of each population. We're planning on having peer and public review of the SSA by the end, actually by mid-December of this year, with publication in the Federal Register by October of 2021. So if you have specific questions about that process or being involved or that plant in general, Sheena is the person for that. We are doing another SSA for on the recovery side to inform a recovery plan for the Texas golden glade crest, which is found in Sabine and St. Augustine counties in East Texas. Again, we are gathering some data from experts. We have a meeting planned with them here in the next couple of months. As I said, this is going to inform, this SSA will inform its recovery plan. We anticipate still having a draft out by fiscal year 2021, so next year sometime, with a final recovery plan in 2022. And for that particular species, along with the white bladder pod, which is another very rare endemic found in the Whitenose Glade Formation. We have been working with the Texas Parks and Wildlife, the botanists there, on a potential Section 6 through their traditional Section 6 program on some outreach and landowner work. So it's still in the works, so that's probably as much as I can go into right now at the moment. And then lastly, the last update is regarding the Texas trailing phlox, which is Phlox nivalis subspecies texensis. And through, again, TPWD, the traditional 6 program, we were able to get a genetics project funded to look at the differences between and among populations for this particular species. That was supposed to start last year, but of course, I'm sure many people have mentioned the COVID situation. That's now been pushed back to start this upcoming spring. So that's all that I have. If you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with myself or others from our field office. Thanks.
Back to TPWDs for some updates on bats. Jonah, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm going to share my screen here really quick. Can you see my screen? All right.
Yes.
So I'm going to give a really brief overview of. I guess what I was asked to do is give an overview of tricolored bats, but I don't know how much experience folks on the call have with bats in general. So we'll start there. First of all, my name is Jonah Evans. I'm the state mammalogist for Texas Parks and Wildlife. Okay, so broadly, Texas has 33 species of bats that have been found in the state. Actually, that number just went up to 34. What a lot of people don't realize about bats, if you're kind of new to the species, is that they are extremely long-lived and very slow to reproduce. They often have one offspring per year and can live 20, 30 or more years even. So from a reproductive biology side, they're more similar to that of a black bear than, say, a small mammal. They also eat many insects, including agricultural pests. The bats at Bracken Bat Cave have been estimated to eat 200 tons of migratory moths every night. And that comes with a huge economic impact. To Texas alone, it's been estimated that it saves farmers $1.4 billion a year in reduced pesticide needs and in reduced crop damage. So Whitenose syndrome is this horrible disease that has been spreading across the United States. It was first discovered in New York in 2007, and it has since spread rapidly westward towards Texas at about a rate of 200 miles per year. It's caused by a fungus known as Pseudogymnoascus destructans, which we will just abbreviate as PD for this presentation, and it's fatal to bats while hibernating. So fortunately, some bats hibernate, some don't. The species that do not hibernate are thus far not seeing big declines as a result of this fungus. It's so far been responsible for the deaths of well over 6 million bats. And for a species that, again, lives a really long time and reproduces really slowly, that could mean multiple human generations of time in order to see species recover. Some very highly susceptible species have declined by greater than 90%. And so here's just a map showing where PD was first discovered, a little red circle, and where it is found currently around the country. So the tricolored bat is a species that we have in East Texas, as you can see on the map right here. It's one of so it's seen major declines in due to whitenose syndrome. Some species are impacted very heavily. Some are kind of resilient to it. Tricolored bats have seen they're in the top 3, I should say, top 3 most impacted species. Some states have seen greater than 90% declines of this species, and due to that, it's currently being considered for some kind of listing action by U.S. Fish and Wildlife, which I think we might hear about after my talk. At this point, we have not observed any declines in Texas, and we are conducting some experimental treatments at sites in East Texas to try to prevent the fungus from killing bats when it gets there. So the issue is, once the fungus arrives at a site, and it's really common throughout the bats, it's very difficult to conduct a treatment at that phase. So the idea is to target it at the invasion front. So right now the fungus has just arrived in Texas and it's spreading. So we're starting the treatments right now at an experimental level. At these sites that we're doing the treatments at are non-cave environments, so they're under culverts, because we're really concerned about any kind of treatment, no matter how safe, what it could do in a natural cave. And these provide a really unique opportunity because there's a huge number of the tricolored bats. In fact, 70% of the known Texas population is found roosting in just 10 culverts in East Texas. So unfortunately, we have seen the fungus actually kill some other species of bats in Texas so far. So Myotis velifer, the cave myotis, is another species that's more common in central and north Texas. Last winter, we started getting reports of dead bats, and we found we sent a whole bunch of them to the National Wildlife Health Center for testing, and over 100 of them that we found tested positive for whitenose syndrome, and so those are the ones that we found. We're sure many more were actually died from the disease, but we just weren't unable to locate them. And at this point, the risk to tricolored bats in Texas and these really southerly warm environments is pretty unknown. We're very concerned because of how much has impacted the species in other parts of its range, but we still haven't seen the declines happen here yet to confirm that this population is as vulnerable as some others. And this is just where we saw the big die-offs occur, right in here, and where we've seen whitenose syndrome in Texas. This is an area where some of the culverts are located that we're interested in East Texas. So. And so lastly, the treatment work we're doing, we're conducting experimental trials using a substance called polyethylene glycol, which is sort of like a soapy-like substance that's very safe and inert, that we spray into the ceiling of these culverts when bats are not present during the summertime. And then we use a VOC concoction called B23 or decanol that has been tested with bats at a railroad tunnel in Georgia, at the Black Diamond Tunnel, I believe it's called. And so far the early results have been encouraging. We've successfully cleared our first hurdle and not seen any disturbance effects as a result of our our study, we have detected one bat that had some of the fungus on it that causes Whitenose Syndrome. So we're expecting to learn a lot in the next year or two. Lastly, I'll just say that project is a collaboration between Texas A&M University and Kennesaw University. And I think that that's all my time. So thank you all.
Thank you, Jonah. And now for Fish and Wildlife, Jennifer, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. I'm going to share my screen here. So yeah, my name is Jennifer Smith-Castro, and I am the Southwest Regional Coordinator for Whitenose Syndrome. And I was just going to give a little update here on the Tricolored Bat SSA that is underway right now. Let's see here. It lets me advance. Here we go. So this is actually a species status assessment for 3 different bat species. So we were petitioned to list the Tricolored Bat in 2016. And now that that work has started, we're considering 2 other species because there's so much overlap in their ranges. So little brown bat, which is this guy here in the middle, and northern long-eared bat are also part of this status assessment process. And so far for that status assessment, we've been looking primarily at Whitenose Syndrome, like Jonah was explaining, some of the impacts that we've seen across the range. And another major threat that we know is an issue is wind power. So bats get killed at the wind turbines as well. And in addition to that, folks working on the SSA are starting to look at forest cover changes, bat exclusions, which means cave or mine closures. And sometimes that happens in a way to not allow bats to continue to use them. And it can be done in other ways, which I'll talk about in a minute, but and also climate changes. And so those are some of the things that the SSA is evaluating right now. They've done a lot of work because it's just a huge area. Most of the eastern U.S. Is part of the Tricolored Bats range, and the little brown bat and it goes further west as well. So it's just a massive area to compile all of the sort of known information about bats in those areas. But so that is, well underway, and the target completion date for that SSA is late spring and early summer of next year of 2021. And then any resulting decisions from that are expected or targeted for the end of fiscal year 2022, so August or September of that year. And I thought it might be of interest just to know kind of across the range the status of Tricolored Bats in terms of state listings. So there are, as you can see here, the different lists. There are several states who have actually listed Tricolored Bat as threatened or endangered on their state lists of endangered species. And there's also a number of states that are looking at Tricolored Bat as a species of conservation concern. And like Jonah said, I think a lot of this was prompted by the huge declines that we're seeing in some areas of Tricolored Bat. And so in those states, I think there's a lot of work going on in terms of surveying and monitoring and some habitat protection work as well. And so in terms of conservation efforts and kind of what we are doing now and what could be done, like Jonah mentioned, the Whitenose Syndrome treatment trials, there's several things going on here, and there's also places around across the range where different types of treatments are being applied experimentally. So there's a vaccine being developed, and so there's some experimental work with that. There's Ultraviolet light can also effectively reduce the fungal load on the bats, and so that's another method that's being attempted. And then, as he mentioned, the polyethylene glycol work and the other VOCs. And then with wind power, there's some curtailment research and implementation with different wind power facilities and acoustic deterrence as well. And so those are some of the things that are happening at sort of a larger scale across the range. And then I think what might be maybe of most interest to this group are the things that involve the forest management practices. And so there's a really great resource that I wanted to point out for folks, and I'll put the link in the chat in case folks are interested. But this beneficial forest management practices for white-nose affected bats has information, specifics about hazard tree removal and prescribed fire, vegetation management, creation and management of forest openings, and non-native invasive control, and different things like that, which I think are the kinds of things that folks in this group might actually be able to implement some of those best management practices. And let's see here. So I guess that's really all I wanted to mention. I wanted to point out a couple of resources. Whitenosesyndrome.org has a wealth of information, and Bat Conservation International, their website also has some valuable information if you're interested in the topic and learning more and kind of what you can do. And then this is another publication, this Forest Management and Bats, which is only in a draft form right now, but the Conservation and Recovery Group with under the Whitenose Syndrome management or working group, they have developed this guide, and I think it's coming out pretty soon. I'm hopeful that it will be coming out soon. And so that's something that I could share later as well, once it is available. So I think that's all I had for the moment.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And if you could post those in the comments. And so thank you again, everyone. I'll do our best to get a summary out of this next week. Now that I didn't hit the record button for the first 3 presentations. And now for the main attraction. What do we do with all this information? What is the path forward? That's a group of speakers with diverse perspectives on the ESA to help us with that question. I'm going to start with asking them all the same question of what tools and resources does your respective organization offer to help stakeholders with ESA compliance and recommendations for how to access them. I'd like to start with Jeff, the Deputy Regional Director for the Southwest Region of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Jeff, are you with us?
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Colin. Appreciate that. I hope everybody can hear me. I am somewhat prone to some technological challenges on occasion. But I think, within the Endangered Species Act, there are a number of flexibilities, and I think our teams across East Texas that are doing a lot of work with many of you all, if not all of you, offer a range of tools and expertise to help navigate what we're doing, because I think, the at-risk work that's spreading across the service, the work that you all are doing, facilitating this kind of collaboration, is really important. When I think about the work that's been done across our region over the last 8 years, we've been able to either preclude the need to list or improve the recovery status of nearly 45 species. And I think this work just allows us to accelerate that solution-oriented conservation. So I think there are tools through that, and then things that we become aware of as our folks do their work. So I think there's lots of collaboration. Our folks are always interested in jumping into these conversations and sharing resources for survey work and a range of other things. So, and we've got lots of expertise across our field stations for folks to take advantage of.
So now Cindy Donor, the former director of the Southeast Region of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Jeff's former boss, and now a sought-after sage in all things ESA compliance.
Indeed, indeed.
Thank you, Colin. So I also want people to know that I also work for the National Alliance of Forest Owners, and NAFO, and I do stuff with DoD related to ESA and trying to find flexible approaches. So as Jeff mentioned, there's the traditional tools, safe harbor, candidate conservation agreements with assurances, and HCPs, but you need to know that there are new tools that aren't used everywhere. It's tools that develop agreements based on the best management practices, a certification process, different agreements that people have that also provide assurances and certainty, and they all are in compliance with the Endangered Species Act. So more are actually being developed as we talk. When we first started working on the at-risk species effort when I was with the service, many of the private landowners thought that HCPs and safe harbors took a little bit too long and they were a little cumbersome. And they asked if there were other options, and other options, like I said, have been developed. So I guess I would look to you and say, what other tools do you think we need to develop? So as you know, and you've already heard some of these things, the benefits of engaging in this proactive process through collaborative conservation, like Jeff mentioned, is Jimmy talked about the benefits of forestry BMPs that are now recognized in the ESA rules that are being done. Certain 4D rules actually exempt forestry practices that comply with BMPs, which means you don't have to worry about future regulation if that's the case. The Fish and Wildlife Service is also ensuring they bring in to the SSA process and the proposed rules and the final rules, the most up-to-date and best commercial and scientific data. So that's a really good thing because you're making sure that the management that is currently being done is incorporated in there, and any information like the surveys you guys have been doing on the Western pond turtles are in there. So one of the things that I was asked to do is provide like what you could do. So I would say you're not alone in dealing with ESA issues. There are a lot of other programs and there are a lot of other entities that are involved, much like the NAFO and Jimmy's Bullock's presentation he gave you in the beginning that are dealing with ESA. Early landowner engagement is key. If you think about species status assessment, those assessments are the basis of all future ESA actions. So whether it's a proposed rule or a recovery plan, that's the basis. So trying to get involved in those if possible. 3 other regions have already started incorporating private landowners into the SSA process where appropriate. The gopher tortoise was one of the first. It developed a habitat management team, which forest owners were a part of. So that was really good. You need to actively listen. You need to talk to the Fish and Wildlife Service and hear what they're talking about. You need to understand their process. And the Fish and Wildlife Service needs to actively listen to the landowners or the states, whatever agencies are involved. So there are a lot of options as you go forward. I would really tell you that being proactive is key. And that the more you engage, the better it is. And Jeff talks about 45 in the Southwest, which is a great number and really, really encouraging. There's about 300 species nationwide that have been precluded, and I'm not sure that includes all of them. That's the Southeast, the Northeast, and the Southwest. So then the last thing I would tell you is Jimmy talked to you about conservation without conflict just today. We have been able to hire an executive director, so we will have more focus of that effort, and there could be lessons learned and success stories that you could look at. So thanks, Colin.
Thank you. So now let's go a little more local. Shane Harrington, program leader for the Texas Forest Service. What resources do you have?
Hey, Colin, thanks for putting this together, and thanks for having us here. One of the things I want to say first off, it is awesome to see the number of people that are on this call and the shift going from reactive to being proactive. I think that's critical when you're talking about managing imperiled species and trying to figure out how are we going to recover species going forward. And the more proactive we can be in that, I think the better off the process becomes, better off the landowner is in that, and providing a voice for the landowner. So tools and resources that Texas A&M Forest Service provides, one of the things that we do provide is we work with pretty much everybody on this call to monitor current ESA situations, species of concern that are being listed. We work with others to address concerns with that potential listing or provide information to Fish and Wildlife Service to consider, in that listing. We work with private landowners every day. That's our bread and butter. And so, we can provide a lot of information to them when needed. We engage them constantly, with forest management in East Texas. And so the quicker that we can get involved with Fish and Wildlife Service and understand what's going on, we can then relay that message to the landowner and hopefully over time ease their concerns with, when I think oftentimes the connotation with when Endangered Species Act, there's a lot of negative connotation there. And so there's a lot of fear because there's a lot of unknowns. And so, by us being involved in the process, we're able to relax some of those fears and help landowners truly understand what's going on here, and also encourage their participation in the process. And so, but we hold certain data that can be used. We write a ton of management plans. We do forestry best management practices. We have a survey that is set up to look at implementation rates. And so, where we find applicable that some of the data that we have can help either prevent a listing or help delist or downlist a species, we try to work with Fish and Wildlife Service and others to provide that information in hopes to kind of clear up the backlog of species or talk about successes in recovery. We've been a part of the red-cockaded woodpecker process for a long time in East Texas. We jointly hold the Safe Harbor Agreement with Texas Parks and Wildlife, which is a model that has served well for us. We're hoping that the same will be true for Louisiana pine snake. So really, I guess our biggest tool in our toolbox is that our natural connection with landowners in East Texas and in Central Texas as well, and working with them on a daily basis. So we're able to get down with them, speak to them, hopefully ease their concerns and pass that information along, be the conduit of information from, say, Fish and Wildlife Service to that landowner. And then we actively engage in these type of discussions so we can represent, their concerns and ensure that hopefully within reason, any decisions that are handed down, minimize any unintended consequences to the private landowner and them trying to, retain their land and manage their land and hopefully find some type of compromise that's somewhere there in the middle where we can recover a species, but also landowners can continue to actively manage their forest and provide the resources that we need, for markets and those type of things. So we rely on the products that wood provides. And so, we work with a lot of people here. So I think that's the biggest tool that we have.
All right. Thank you, Shane. Rob, from the Texas Forestry Association.
Hey, Colin, I want to reiterate what Shane said, that we're just pleased this is even happening. So thank you to you and your colleagues at the Comptroller's Office, all those from the service and other agencies here that help provide data and are doing cool research. And, we had Mandy here at our office after that first initial NAFO/service meeting here. And I just would like to, for the Texas Forest Service, the Forestry Association that has over 3,000 members of private forest landowners, industrial forest landowners, all of the harvesting contractors, many of the manufacturing facilities, most of the service providers, pesticide applicators, prescribed burn managers, on and on, pine plantation planters, all that kind of stuff. So we really would like to facilitate the dot connecting between all these agencies and the private landowners, especially our members here. We also, lobby on behalf of them in Austin. So if there's ever any assistance we can get in the back door for some of you guys without naming your agencies, I certainly would make that, you can make that contact to me and we can ask and educate on your behalf as well. So we do have friends there that understand the importance of all the work that's being done and the communication that opportunities like this present to private landowners. So thank you, and I appreciate being a part of this, and looking forward to more communication in the future. And like Jimmy said earlier, looking forward to one of those field opportunities for the group early next year, hopefully. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rob, and encourage you all. We have just two more people. Elizabeth Bates, she's the Conservation Initiative Specialist at Texas Parks and Wildlife.
Hi, yes, thank you, Colin. I wanted to mention a couple of programs that are available. We have our Wildlife Habitat Assessment Program, and this is a program that reviews a variety of different development projects, including highways, pipelines, utilities, renewable energy projects, construction projects, among others. And they will evaluate the projects for impacts to natural resources, including rare, threatened, and endangered species. And then they'll make recommendations for avoidance, for minimization, and mitigation of those impacts. And so I think that's a very valuable program that we offer. If you just type in TPWD, Wildlife Habitat Assessment Program, into your internet browser, it should pop right up. And there's a little map down there. If you click on it, it'll enlarge the map. And depending on what part of the state the project is in, there's a habitat assessment biologist associated with different parts of the state. Again, as Shane mentioned, we are a co-permit holder for the red-cockaded woodpecker Safe Harbor Agreement or Safe Harbor Habitat Conservation Plan. And so that is available to landowners in parts of East Texas. We also have our field biologists. And I want to make sure that people are aware that our field biologists are out there and they can provide technical guidance regarding wildlife management for private landowners. And so for those people interested in finding out who your local biologist is, if you just type in TPWD, find a biologist into your internet browser, it'll pull up the website. There's a map of Texas. Just click on the county that you're interested in, and it will pull up the contact information for that local biologist. I also want to mention our urban wildlife program. I think this is an important program for a lot of our urban areas. So we have urban biologists stationed in Austin, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, El Paso, the lower Rio Grande Valley, and San Antonio. And they're a valuable resource. They can provide technical guidance to the public, to corporations. They work a lot with local governments, as well as conservation organizations, and they're a wealth of information regarding natural resource management. So I just wanted to point out that program as well, and that's called the Urban Wildlife Program.
Wonderful. Thank you, Elizabeth, and we'll be sure to have those links in the summary. And now for our final speaker, Bill, would you take us out?
Yeah, thanks, Colin. Really appreciate you having and all of us and putting this together. So for the Sabine River Authority's part, we'll continue to collaborate with researchers and search where possible. We really believe that improving data that's out there on the front side of the curve is one of the most important things that can be done. We want to help facilitate conversations and certainly data sharing between researchers and with Fish and Wildlife as well. And then going forward, Sabine River Authority is investigating conservation agreements, and what will that look like? How can we provide a benefit to the species that are of concern, and also obtain a little bit of regulatory assurance in the basin. So we're looking forward to pursuing that with Fish and Wildlife.
All right, we've come a long way in 14 months. I want to say thank you to everyone. This is pretty exciting, everything that's happening in East Texas and the attention that it's getting, and I hope we can continue that, all working together. Have a lovely lunch.
Thank you, Colin, Lauren, everybody. Right. Good stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.